Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we've got a single, incredibly focused stack of sources, and they take us straight into the core of ethical behavior, drawing from the biblical book of James.
Specifically chapter 2, verses 5 through 9.
Exactly. This is a deep dive into what our sources are calling the essential unity of law and love, and it's all centered on that one command: love your neighbor as yourself.
And that command, it's not just a nice suggestion, it's explicitly called the royal law.
Right.
And our sources, they immediately set up this massive ethical challenge. It's all about how we treat people based on their outward appearance.
You mean their social or economic status?
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that becomes the deciding factor on whether we're seen as ethical people or, well, as fundamental lawbreakers.
And that is a huge claim. So our mission today is to unpack that. Why is showing partiality, playing favorites based on wealth or power, why is that not just bad manners, but an actual sin?
We need to understand the structural problem it creates. And then we'll explore what genuine, intentional love actually looks like in practice.
Moving beyond just feelings and into action.
Exactly. We'll trace this theological domino effect that's surprisingly clear, and then we're going to get into a really powerful real-world case study from right here in Taiwan.
Showing how this was applied to fight for social and economic justice.
For decades.
Okay, let's get into it. Let's start with the integrity of the law itself. That royal law, love your neighbor as yourself, it sounds so simple.
It does. But the sources show how quickly that simplicity it crumbles the moment you introduce partiality.
How so?
Well, it's completely unequivocal. If you selectively show honor or respect based only on external things, wealth, nice clothes, social standing, you are fundamentally committing sin. You are, in the eyes of the law, convicted as a lawbreaker. It's an incredibly high standard.
But I have to stop you there, because for a lot of us, showing a bit of deference to someone powerful or wealthy, that might just seem like basic social courtesy.
That's a great question.
So where's the line between politeness and, sinful partiality?
The line is drawn at judgment. Politeness, saying please, thank you, that's fine.
Yeah.
Partiality is when you elevate one person's status so high that you start making judgments against someone else, against the poor, the marginalized.
So if a person's social standing starts to dictate your judgment of a situation...
Or who you even listen to.
Yeah.
Then you've crossed the line. You've violated that principle of impartiality.
And what's the mechanism here? How does this social favoritism turn into actual full-blown law-breaking? The sources talk about a kind of domino effect, which sounds chilling.
It is. It connects partiality directly to moral corrosion.
Yeah.
The moment you prioritize human status, the power, the money above the clear command to treat all your neighbors equally, you've essentially installed a faulty operating principle in your entire ethical system.
A bug in the code.
A bug in the code. Let's get specific, because the text gives some really clear examples of how this one act of external respect leads to wider disobedience. Yes, the source material lays out 4 powerful connections. First, respecting high status might cause you to lie. You might cover up for a wealthy person's mistake or, exaggerate their virtues just to get on their good side.
Right, to gain favor.
Second, it can lead to idolatry. You start putting that person's influence, their money, their approval, above your own moral principles, maybe even above God.
And
Third, and this is very practical, it could lead you to gain illegal or ill-gotten wealth from the rich. You become complicit in their unethical dealings just to stay in their circle.
So you're trading your own moral integrity for some kind of social or financial benefit.
Exactly. And the fourth example is maybe the most shocking one. Prioritizing human status could even lead you to mistreat your own Karens.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. In silly context, if a wealthy patron demanded all your time, all your loyalty, you might actually neglect your family duties, which are commanded by law, just to keep that person happy.
It just shows that once your moral compass is guided by human status instead of a divine principle, your whole life can spin completely off course.
That's the point.
So if I understand the principle of honesty, I don't lie. But the source claims that if I break one of these, I have the potential to break them all. What does that say about the unified nature of the law?
This is where the theology gets really logical. Think of the law as the core code of an operating system.
Okay.
All the functions, handling money, dealing with family, telling the truth, they all stem from the same source code. If you introduce a virus, a fundamental flaw into that code, which is what partiality is.
You haven't just broken one little act.
No. You've corrupted the integrity of the whole system. Breaking the law isn't just about a single transactional crime like stealing something.
It's an act of rebellion.
Precisely, an act of rebellion against the authority that set up the whole ethical framework in the first place. There is only one lawgiver. All laws come from that same source. Disobeying one rule it's fundamentally a rejection of the authority behind all morality.
You can't just cherry-pick the laws you like.
You can't. The system is unified. Partiality is a rejection of the source of ethical order itself. It's powerful stuff.
Okay, that completely transforms how I think about showing partiality. It's not a minor social gaffe, it's a huge structural failure. So let's pivot. Let's go from what not to do to the positive command. What to do.
Practicing Christian love.
Right, because when we hear love your neighbor, I think most of us, we instinctively think of warm, fuzzy feelings.
And that's exactly what the source material challenges. It makes it very clear that Christian love is far more disciplined, far more intentional than just emotion.
So it doesn't mean I have to like everybody.
Not at all. It does not mean you must like every person or agree with them. You might genuinely dislike their habits or their political views or just their mannerisms. You might not want to be best friends with them. And that's okay. That's not the standard.
So you're saying the source argues we don't actually need to feel affection to be truly loving? I mean, that runs counter to how most of us understand the word love.
It's a crucial distinction. The sources define Christian love explicitly as an act of will. It's not an emotion you're trying to manufacture.
It's an act of will.
The definition is this: Christian love means treating others the way God treated you. It's a deliberate choice to extend benevolence, regardless of how you subjectively feel.
I think that point alone requires a serious reevaluation for a lot of us, especially in difficult relationships. That's a massive shift. So if love is an act of will, what drives it? What's the mechanism?
The motivation shifts entirely. It becomes about glorifying the divine source. And the method relies on a power beyond just our own human capacity, what the source calls the power of the Holy Spirit.
So it's an intentional, willed commitment.
Yes, to act justly and benevolently even when the person you're dealing with is difficult or unappealing.
And here's the beautiful and kind of surprising result the sources mention. When you intentionally treat others with this willed love, you might find that the emotion eventually follows the action. You might start seeing qualities in that person you had completely overlooked before. The action changes the emotion, not the other way around.
It totally challenges our assumptions about how relationships are built. It means the answer to the question, is it possible to truly love someone you don't particularly like, is a resounding yes.
Because love is a choice of action, not a state of feeling.
Exactly.
That brings the royal law right into our daily lives. It makes it practical. But before we get to our case study, let's think about the context of neighbor. The sources include a powerful humanitarian reflection on this.
Yeah, it expands our definition of who our neighbor is far beyond our local community.
Right.
The speaker recalls the comfort of a cold day in Taiwan, having a hot drink, warm clothes, and then contrast that with the devastating life and death situation happening globally.
Specifically referencing the suffering in the Russia-Ukraine war zone.
People living below freezing, energy systems destroyed, no basic heat, all while under constant threat.
It's a moment of profound realization.
It is. These are people God created and loves, and they're suffering from an extreme partiality imposed by conflict. That global reflection really sets the framework for the local case study. It shows our duty isn't just to the people we see or like.
It's also to the socially and geographically marginalized, and that takes us perfectly to the case study in Taiwan.
A hyperlocal but equally profound story of justice.
Let's dive in. This is the personal history of a minister who arrived in Hualien-Puxincheng Township back in 1991, right out of seminary. It's a perfect illustration of the royal law and love in action.
Hualien, at that time, was a place of deep social and geographic division. There was a railway line that physically separated Xincheng from Shulin Township.
And Shulin Township was the main residence for the Turoko or Truku indigenous peoples.
There was effectively a line drawn in the sand. It separated status.
And the social injustice on the Shulin side was profound. What were the conditions like back in 1991?
Legal protections for indigenous rights were, well, they were severely lacking across the country. But this community was suffering acutely. Even though many were committed Christians, Protestant or Catholic, they were widely looked down upon.
They faced disadvantages everywhere.
Economy, education, social standing, you name it. They were marginalized by the dominant society. The government, according to the sources, just hadn't put enough effort into providing the necessary rights or resources.
So this wasn't just poor treatment. This was structural partiality applied by society at large.
Exactly. Their social status, which was assigned to them by the majority culture, was the main obstacle to a dignified life. So when the minister asked how to embody the royal law, how to act in love,
He realized just giving them food or a sermon wouldn't fix the underlying problem.
right, he had to target structural change, and he started with education.
So what did he do?
He spent 35 years there in companionship and ministry, and he says his single biggest achievement was ensuring that all Indigenous children finished high school.
All of them.
All of them. And that was radical at the time, because 30 years ago, many of these kids stopped their education after elementary school. They were basically being funneled into a predetermined, low-status life.
Why was high school specifically the game changer? I mean, it sounds pretty basic to us today.
Because without that high school education, they were immediately consigned to low-level, exploitable labor for their entire lives. But the stakes were even higher. The source specifically mentions the terrible risk for young girls.
Oh, no.
Without education, without economic alternatives, they risked being sold into prostitution, sometimes ending up in notorious places like Waxy Street, Snake Alley.
That just brings the danger of social partiality into brutal focus. So providing a high school education was a direct intervention against human trafficking.
And extreme economic vulnerability. It was the definition of practicing the royal law as an act of will.
The goal was holistic then.
Completely. Change through education to improve their lives, not just spiritually, but also economically, financially, even their diet and health. It's the perfect long-term application of that unity of law and love.
And the big lesson, as the minister explains it, is that our definition of self-worth has to come from faith, from understanding we are all created by God, not from the low status that the partiality of others assigns to us.
And in wrapping up, the minister reminds us about that necessary balance between grace and law. Grace doesn't negate the importance of the law. The law still defines what's just and ethical. But the law can't be the sole standard for how we interact with people.
Because if we only enforce the letter of the law without any compassion,
we risk becoming the very judges that James warns against.
So the space between law and grace is its mutual tolerance and active benevolence.
That's it. And that mutual tolerance means actively stepping out of our comfortable little bubbles. It means not living perpetually in your social or ideological or economic echo chamber.
The sources are pretty clear. Nobody likes to be ignored or excluded.
Or judged just based on where they stand on the societal ladder.
That's the practical call to action, and it hits home immediately. I'm thinking about the workplace, the community. If we're going to apply this right now, what does that look like tomorrow morning?
It means extending genuine care. Spiritual support, sure, but also worldly guidance and advocacy, especially to new employees or colleagues.
The ones who are overlooked.
The ones who are overlooked, who lack status, who are clearly struggling. If you spent all your time catering to senior management, you were showing partiality.
But extending that intentional care to, as the text puts it, the least of these brothers. The overlooked newcomer, the struggling single parent, the person who's constantly put down, that transforms a professional relationship.
It changes it from one defined by hierarchy to one defined by intentional love. It brings light, warmth, and genuine humanity into an environment.
So as you reflect on this deep dive into the royal law, take a moment to consider your own habits. This comes straight from the reflective questions and the sources we looked at today. Where in your life are you currently making excuses to avoid obeying a clear instruction to love, simply because you're showing undue respect or deference or partiality toward human opinion or status or wealth?
That is where the royal law meets the road.
Yeah.
Until next time, keep digging deeper.